Hello, everybody. Welcome to week 4, and it is Money Week. We're going to be talking about global trade and finance today, and then we're talking about development on Friday. So, in honor of Money Week, you can't see it right now, but I have dollar bills that I am just making it rain in this office right now. It is just covered in those little birdies flying around. So let's talk about global trade and finance. We're actually not going to spend as much time on finance here, just kind of towards the end. All right, so where we're going to start is we're going to start by talking about international political economy again. Now, we talked about this before spring break a little bit. I just want to kind of go over just some big ideas first before we dive into this. So when we talk about global trade, there's a lot of ways to talk about it, but it sort of fits in the same way when we talk about international relations. We sort of can group these things into theories: realism, liberalism, constructivism, etc. And even within those, there's lots of differences, but those are sort of the main ways of thinking about it. We can do the same thing when we're talking about global trade. So one big set of ideas is what's called economic nationalism, or it's sometimes called mercantilism. And it essentially, now the truth is it's not completely related to realism, but it's going to be related to realism enough that for the purposes of this class, you can sort of equate those things. So realism essentially says states should use economic strength to further their national interests. If I say realism, you say power. And remember, when we talk about things like power, it's going to be things like military power, but economic power can be transformed into military power. So for the realist, if that guy over there gets more economic power, they can turn that into military power. So that's a competition as well. Whoever is the richer it's gonna be a competition between that. So states should use their economic strength to further their national interests. So you should take your wealth that you make and turn it around so that you can invest in more power and on and on. In a way, it's kind of like the way we think about business and capitalism. Is a company like Coca-Cola should use the profits to further the company's strength, which often means more profits. So that's sort of the idea there. So in this way of thinking, economic policy is there's no separation between economic policy and security policy, which also means there's no separation between trade policy and security policy. And then one more idea we'd want to associate with economic nationalism. We're going to talk about this more later here in a second, but is another realism concept, which is this thing of zero sum, which means my loss is your gain. If another country buys our stuff, they can't buy your stuff, which means we get the economic gain from that, you don't. And that's the sort of idea here, which again is important because it can be turned into military, or I should say power. So that's economic nationalism. That's the first one we're going to talk about, set of sort of ideas we're going to talk about with trade. The second one we're going to talk about is what's called economic internationalism or economic liberalism. And it's probably not a big surprise this is associated with liberalism. So now again, think about liberalism. And when I say liberalism, you say exactly. So one of the things that this really focuses on is that international economics should be harmonious. Now, it doesn't mean it's not competitive. That's not what that means. It just means that, just like with liberalism, the belief is that we're safer if we cooperate. And the same thing here. We are richer if we cooperate. That's what they mean by harmonious here. Not that there's not a competition. I mean, Target wants my business, Walmart wants my business. They're going to compete over getting me in there. At the same time, myself and Target, when I walk in to buy something, we're working together. I'm not sort of trying to do everything on my own. Everyone is better off if we cooperate. So what this liberalism is also going to sort of talk about is this sort of free market, the free market. So the free market is, when we say free market, we mean a market that is free from what? And that is government intervention. So you're going to want to keep politics and economics separate. Now this is a misnomer. It's not true. politics and economics are going to be very sort of involved with each other. But for the most part, the idea is that the government should stay out of economics, let the marketplace be the marketplace, and the government should exist, or politics should exist, to protect the marketplace, but not put their fingers on the scale. That's sort of what they mean by that. So what does prosperity mean here? Because again, for economic nationalism, the key thing is not so much prosperity. It's about me being richer than the other guy, which means I have more power than the other guy. In economic internationalism, though, or liberalism, we're talking about prosperity. That's what we're talking about. And that means economic interchange free of political restrictions. If you want prosperity, not just for yourself and not just for your neighbor, but for everybody, the whole world, economic interchange free of political restrictions, free trade. And so we have organizations like the WTO, World Trade Organization, which exists. Its one job in life is to increase free trade around the world, decrease tariffs. All right, there's one more set of theories that we're not going to talk about, but we have talked about it before, and that's sort of connected with Marxism. But I do want to put this out here, just even though we're only going to spend 3 lines and then never talk about it again. But I do want to put this out there because there's so many people in the world that believe in this sort of set of this is how trade is or should be done. Not should be done, but this is how trade sort of is. And the rest of this stuff, economic nationalism, internationalism, is just sort of a, pulling the wool over your eyes. You're not really trying to get rich, you're trying to do this. And that's called economic structuralism or dependency theory. And essentially in this, global trade is essentially about rich countries exploiting poor countries. Go back to what we talked about with dependency theory. And this, again, is associated with Marxism. So how do you fix this? Capitalism should be ended. Now, that's all we're going to say about that. We're only going to talk about economic nationalism, economic liberalism today, and that's it. So you're going to go read an article about ventilator supplies and things like that. And then you're going to watch Donald Trump on economic nationalism. That's where we're going to start.